Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Jim Nichols. And noted artist and investigator, lecturer Jim Nichols has produced an extraordinary body of UFO illustrations that has been published internationally in magazines, articles, books, and the internet. His art was routinely featured on the History Channel's UFO Hunters, as well in his art book, Case Files Revealed. He shares the untold stories behind 40 of his most dramatic UFO illustrations based on actual accounts. His book is available through his website, which is jimnicholsufo.net. And Jim is also winner of 2 EBE-Awards at 2010's International UFO Conference in Laughlin, Nevada, for his video documentary about Nazi saucers entitled The Al-debaran Mystery, which is also available now as a DVD from UFOTV Productions. In addition, 13 of Jim's UFO-related video essays are now presented by UFOTV on YouTube, which can be accessed from his website as well. And he has also been a guest on my show. And it's with great pleasure I welcome Jim back. Jim, how are you today?
Hi, it's good to be with you.
It's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I know you've been a busy man the past week and a half or so, huh?
It's been kind of touch and go. I didn't know if I was going to make the show or not today, but things have worked out, so here I am.
Yeah, thank goodness for house lines, right?
Yes.
I'm glad you're here. And I know we talked a little bit about what you've been digging into in the past, some information you'd maybe like to share with our listeners about JPL and rocket scientists and Jack Parsons and all that good stuff?
Oh, yeah. Well, I stumbled onto some really interesting data about the secret occult history of our National Aeronautics and Space Administration that I was, totally unaware of until just recently.
Mm-hmm.
They always talk about Werner von Braun and the Nazis, which is, gets the big play, but as it turns out, there's more than just Nazis operating at very high echelons within our National Aeronautics and Space Administration that really few people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very interesting occult connection, and that links all the way back to a gentleman named Aleister Crowley, the famous Satanist. I said, well, what in the hell has Satanism and Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons? How could that possibly be connected to NASA?
Mm-hmm.
And well, lo and behold, it's totally bizarre, but there it is. It's part of the history.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. His name keeps creeping up, of course, Aleister Crowley, the infamous dark ritual guy. And I understand where people are coming from with that, but I'd like to know, I wonder how much of that is actually mythology versus real hardcore ritual. Coming from my mystical background of ritual, I'm well aware of what it takes to pull off a really, really powerful ritual. So I was wondering if you can elaborate a little bit, if you can, on your sources insofar as where did this data come from that you acquired about this whole story?
Well, I stumbled onto a video presentation that Richard Hoagland had done, I think way back in 1997.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right after he and Mike Barra, I think, it was either right before or right after they did the book Dark Mission, where they were researching some rather bizarre occult links to different NASA moon projects. And there seemed to be an occult pattern within some of their projects. And so Mike Barra and Richard Hoagland dug into that a little bit deeper, and and the deeper they went, the more bizarre it became, and which led to the original association between Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, and the Aleister Crowley Society that was also established in Pasadena, California around that same time. And the key player, the key link between all this was rocket design engineer Jack Parsons, who was working, he and a group of his buddies were working at Caltech, and just before World War II. And Jack Parsons was his dream was to build rockets, and so they were working at Caltech on just a shoestring budget to try to perfect solid fuel rocket propulsion. And they were reasonably successful with that, and successful enough to where it caught the attention of the Defense Department. And they liked what he was doing, and suddenly he had virtually unlimited funding to start making rockets. And which their little project turned into the Jet Propulsion Laboratory there in Pasadena, which was an adjunct, which was a precursor actually to the rocket programs at NASA. So you can see how this little venture just bloomed into something that was really, really huge and tremendously involved.
Right.
But the Jack Parsons also had another interest other than building rockets, and that was the occult. He was profoundly interested in the occult. And so he joined the Ordo Templi Orientis Lodge there in Pasadena and eventually became Grand Master. So not only was he a Grand Master of making space rockets, he became a Grand Master of the occult. And he became directly acquainted with Aleister Crowley at that point.
Okay.
So anyway, as the story goes, apparently Aleister Crowley himself had been in contact with aliens or extraterrestrials as far back as 1904. And the inference in the Richard Hoagland video, the inference was that information that they had gained from Aleister Crowley's extraterrestrials suggested that there were artifacts on both the moon and Mars that needed to be visited or even recovered, retrieved. So Crowley's extraterrestrials were very specific about that there were artifacts on both the moon and Mars, and there may have been a reference to Venus also. But anyway, this is where it all suddenly gets kind of interwoven into the higher administrative levels of NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
So what do you think the purpose was behind the ceremonies in general? I mean, so we're talking about possible acquirement of artifacts off-world. So were they looking for technology to be able to navigate to those areas in order to retrieve these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where you suddenly have this convergence between Jack Parsons' rocket technology and Wernher von Braun's rocket technology. And what Mike Barra and Richard Hoagland discovered or uncovered were they're within NASA. They always say, well, it was a Nazi program. Well, it was in part, but it was a convergence of three powerful occult interests. It was the Nazis, it was Aleister Crowley's magicians there in Pasadena, and it was also Freemasons. There was a profound Freemasonic influence at the highest levels of NASA also. So what it looks like is that NASA's Apollo projects were actually a combined secret society enterprise to obtain artifacts that were of tremendous value to secret societies on the moon and possibly even Mars. And this also addresses the all the rumors and so forth that actually we've been to Mars also.
Right.
But anyway, Crowley's little aliens told him, essentially, I think they gave him rather specific areas to look for, to go to on Mars and the Moon to find these artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting, and this goes back to the, if you remember the Brookings report that came out in 1960, just before we went on manned missions into space, that, well, it might not be a good idea to disclose this to the public if we actually did find evidence of extraterrestrial reality.
Mm-hmm.
But they also, if you look at the wording of the Brookings report, it specifically stated that they as if they expected to find artifacts on the Moon and on Mars that would have to be withheld from the public. So, in retrospect, it looks like it almost looks like especially the Apollo project was actually a very private secret society mission that was never intended to be available to the general public. This was only to high initiates within the secret societies within NASA.
Mm-hmm. It's like a smokescreen. Well, it seems to me like all of their all of the displays they were doing, with all of their missions were just was just kind of like an obfuscation for the bigger scenery. So, can you elaborate a little bit on the artifacts and were they acquired? Do you know offhand? Is there any record?
That's the big question.
Mm-hmm.
Now, allegedly they gathered some moon rocks and that are what I think are on display at the Smithsonian Institution. But I seriously doubt that we will ever know very specifically what kind of extraterrestrial artifacts were ever, discovered or picked up or examined on either the Moon or Mars, and that those are secrets that are only available or only accessed by high initiates within these secret societies.
Mm-hmm. And how much of those secret societies are related to, like, the CIA, would you say? Probably quite a few, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, well, that was always part of secret societies and the Illuminati and Freemasonry, and all that. To begin with, was to have very profound control over, well, not just the United States, not just the CIA, but MI6 in Britain. These are all very structured very similarly to secret societies. So the most sensitive secrets are only available to the high initiates.
Right. And even then, I look at a lot of the all of our missions and everything else that we've been doing is just kind of, like I said before, it's a front and a smokescreen, because to me, I'm sure that a lot of this, the way they're able to traverse different areas in planetary systems is way beyond rockets and all that. Obviously, it's through a different black program. So, once again, we're being kind of swept away by deception, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
And it's really stated. If you look at some of the comments by the classic Freemason Albert Pike, who was a Confederate general during the Civil War. He makes it very clear in his writings that it is imperative to keep the highest secrets away from the uninitiated, the mundane, run-of-the-mill public, because they are not worthy. They are simply not worthy to have access to these secrets. So you present, and you look at how NASA has presented a general perception of their space activities, that's specifically designed for public consumption.
Right. Yeah.
And after you dig into the photographs of the Apollo landings and so forth, there's so many anomalies that would suggest, well, yeah, a lot of what was going on was staged for public consumption.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Totally.
What was the real deal that was going on? And it's like there's obvious some huge lies being told here. Well, one of the major lies is, well, okay, is the Van Allen radiation belt as dangerous as they say it is? Because as you know, the research that people have done is that the Apollo spacecraft could not have flown safely through the radiation belt with that would have seriously injured, if not killed, any astronauts who had flown through it. And the Apollo mission capsules, nor the astronauts, even their spacesuits, were designed to protect them from that level of radiation. So it's like, well, okay, is there really a radiation belt there? And they did fly to the moon without any problems, or the radiation belt was so intense that they had to find some alternative way of flying through it, which involved a technology that the public is simply not allowed to know.
Right, I think you're right. It's not allowed to know. And, it's really interesting because I can understand to some degree you want to protect sensitive data and you want to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands of, of people that would misuse technology, obviously. But it seems to me through all of this being overprotective and secret societies, they've actually are the ones that wound up misusing the technology and the information.
Well, they have their own agenda for it, and it's anybody's guess what they ultimately plan to do. But it's obviously data or artifacts or whatever that is going to make their secret societies even more powerful.
Right. Well,
they would not engage this kind of activity at this level of expense and so forth unless it was really, really important to their ambitions.
Right. And the way I look at it, you cannot erase celestial history mapped in the stars. That's just something they can't do. However, they certainly can erase information here on Earth. And of course, they've done that with us on this world through books, everything from education systems and everything else that's been going on.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't know how aware you are of the arcane astrological alignments that were involved in the lunar landings. And so much of it was oriented to specific alignments of the stars Sirius and Osiris in their relationship to the the Tranquility Base landing area that was picked out on the moon. And you think, why would that matter? It's like you have to be. According to the Masonic precepts that go into the alignments and so forth, their landing programs, it's just uncanny. Now, the original Apollo 11 landing there at Tranquility Base on the moon. Exactly 33 minutes after they had landed, 32nd degree Freemason Buzz Aldrin allegedly had conducted a little Masonic ceremony inside the lunar lander. And his Masonic apron, which he took to the moon, and there's a photograph of him standing on the moon in his spacesuit with the little apron on the front of his suit. That apron is on display at the Scottish Rite Temple in Washington, D.C.
Right. Well, it sounds like they were definitely using the symbolism insofar as their rituals go and their trips to the quote-unquote moon and the illusion of. But then a lot of that, I'm really convinced after all the research I've done that certain parts of that whole event, shall we say, was actually staged and not 100% accurate. So, you know what I mean by that.
Well, I all the pictures that they show to the public look staged. But
right.
On the other hand, it looks like, well, when you understand the significant, the arcane significance, the occult significance of these missions, it seems to me that I suspect that they actually went there.
Mm-hmm.
They actually went there, but they may have gotten there in technology or using technology that was never photographed.
Right. Well, that makes more sense than the what they've presented to the masses. That's for darn sure. And of course, the fact that it was partially filmed and certain scenes were kind of played as if in a movie, that would tell me point blank that there were things that were happening behind the scenes that were more technologically advanced that they wanted to disclose to the masses.
Yeah. Well, so much of this is these lunar landings and so forth were oriented to specific alignments of Osiris and Sirius, which directly relates to ancient Egyptian alchemy and the occult.
Right. Yeah.
Osiris being, Orion. I'll get it here. The constellation Orion is a metaphor for Osiris, the god of Egypt, and the star Sirius is metaphor for Isis. So you have this Isis-Osiris connection, profound connection with all the Apollo landings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just so happens that another man who rose to a very high level of authority within NASA was an Egyptian. His name was Farouk El-Baz, and he got on board with NASA in 1967, and he was ultimately given complete control over arranging all the landing coordinates for the Apollo missions. He was an Egyptian. And it's just by another curious coincidence that his father was an expert in ancient Egyptian mythologies.
That's interesting.
So what is going on here? What is going? And both okay. And Aleister Crowley, his occult interests, and the Freemasons, and the Nazis, all three of these occult groups at the hierarchy within NASA all three of them are obsessed with ancient Egyptian astrology and occult sciences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see why. Well, there's a lot of power involved in ritual like that and mysticism. But what's really interesting? You look back at ancient mystery schools and the high alchemy that they used to do way before, I'm talking Atlantean type things. It has nothing to do with the Masonic rituals of the day, although the Masons actually adopted a lot of those rituals and contorted them into their own version of a ritual. So they're really not using the right, let's put it this way, I feel like a lot of their data is off. And even though they're doing things and they're moving and opening doors, so to speak, I don't believe that they're doing it in alignment with the way the ancient mystery schools functioned.
Well, true, and you have to understand how many centuries these ancient traditions have been rehashed and retranslated, and how many permutations they've gone through.
Right.
To where, how close are secret societies today to the ancient alchemy of Egypt at the time of the pharaohs? So it's like, there's room for variation there. Right. And a lot of it has been deliberate variations. So my secret society is going to be just a little bit different than your secret society, which makes my secret society better than your secret society. So there's always been this competition.
Right. Yeah, it gets lost in translation without a doubt. Right. And also due to their spiritual evolution, because the more corrupted they are, the worse their rituals will be. Insofar as output goes, it's like a computer. It's input-output. If you have a clean communication and a clean and direct lineage with what I call celestial heritage, then, of course, the rituals come out really pure in consciousness. But if they're tainted and they're about control, manipulation, or there's some kind of a deep-seated agenda which is based on something that's not so positive, I would suspect that you'd bring in a lot less positive entities or whatever it is you want to establish in there,
Well, I think that's what we've seen. I think, especially with the rise of Adam Weishaupt and the Illuminati and all that stuff, which has taken all that ancient alchemy and focused it into something that's it's just about control and power.
Right, exactly. Well, you have to realize, too, that they've taken a lot of the ancient mystery schools. I mean, a lot of those beings who were very advanced, they were persecuted and murdered, and then their information was stolen. So, you know, you look back at the quote-unquote history of man, it's not very pretty when you look from the stars and observe it from the stars. It's actually quite nasty. And so when I look at all that, I'm like, you know, it doesn't matter what they've acquired. It's kind of like stealing an archive of ancient data, but if you don't have the right frequency to absorb the data correctly, then it's worthless. And I think that's what happened to these guys.
Well, I don't know if it's worthless, but I think it becomes more dangerous. And I think these guys have clearly demonstrated that.
Right. Well, they can't control it.
Right. You know, it was the original, the most, probably one of the most powerful alchemical techniques or whatever we're going to call it, was the Hebrew Kabbalah. This was strictly for hundreds of years. You know, this is a tradition that was only available to the Jewish alchemists. And it wasn't until about the time of the Knights Templar that the Kabbalah was actually accessed and translated into Latin. And apparently, it was the magical secrets, the magical alchemical secrets within the Kabbalah that was the Holy Grail. This is what the Knights Templar became obsessed with. And well, who were the Knights Templar? Well, they were hired by the King of France, who liked to have just a little bit more power and control, right? And he sent the Templars down to the temple in Jerusalem to access as much of this secret alchemical science as they could. And so this information gets translated into Latin and begins to spread all through Europe. And it becomes, multiple permutations of this original Kabbalah magic. That just has been disseminated, age after age, since then.
Right.
And so, so now, 1938 or whatever, you have Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley doing their latest version of all this magic, out in Pasadena, California. And then somehow it all gets woven into our National Aeronautics and Space Administration programs.
Right.
So it's just a bizarre, trail of events here. But it's very, very interesting.
It is interesting. Well, I know a lot of people are really big on the Crowley, whether they love him or hate him. It's the concept of the mystery behind the person. But coming from the esoteric background that I come from, of course, and the craft as well, a lot of us, we just look at Crowley like, well, we didn't think his magic was that hot or that great, and we don't think his rituals are anything special, and they're usually low-order magic. And, depending on what he really had access to. Now, if he's using that in combination with a technological artifact, then that might create some anomalies. But, regular ritual, nah, right. He doesn't have any power. And that's what amazed me. But he does have a connection to a lot of different intelligence agencies, which, of course, were involved in mind control. And that tells me point blank, you have mass hypnosis going on. You have a massive ritualistic symbolism going on across the board, whether it's through NASA or somebody else, which is actually subliminally affecting our civilization.
Exactly. Well, it's so pervasive within our civilization now. It's like, how do you extract yourself from it? Right.
How do you deprogram is really the word. Yeah.
How do you deprogram something that's spread, so pervasive?
Well, and I don't have a problem with ritual, Jim, as long as it's positive and it's for the benefit and highest good for all on this world. But the bottom line, it seems like it's been very insidious, and there have been things that have been going on that have not been in the highest good for anybody on this world.
Right. Right.
So, it's really unfortunate, but I find it fascinating, and I like the research that you've been doing on that. I mean, I think there's something to be said about it. And, of course, coming from the Masons, like I said before, I have a connection to Masonic Scottish Rite Masons on my mother's side. So I look at them as if I know there's positives and negatives, So I understand that, but I've been around the good guys, so if that's even a benefit. But I'm sure they're the ones that aren't so nice out there as well. But another thing I was going to ask you, with all this stuff going on, and the Masons are just one part of it, or these secret societies, but you've got stuff going on right now in the Middle East that is far more devious than any Masonic ritual. So what do you think about all that?
Well,
Pandora's box.
You can relate that back to Aleister Crowley. Crowley, in 1904, got married and took his new bride, Rose, to the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and on their honeymoon. And one night he took Rose up to the king's chamber, and he held a private ritual there. And so the next morning, and Rose was just going along for the ride. She was not an occultist in any sense as like he was, and she was certainly not a student of ancient Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
But the next morning, she woke up and seemed in like a semi-trance, and she told Aleister, she kept saying over and over again, "They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you." And Aleister thought, what the devil are you talking about? Well, anyway, he decided to take her down to the museum, the Cairo Museum, just to see how she would react. Well, she got inside there, and she kept going from case to case, like she was agitated, like she was looking for something. And she finally came to this one display case, which was number 666, and pointed at the object in the case, and it was a representation of the Egyptian god Horus. And she says, "That's him. That's who came to me last night." And she says, "He has a message for you." So it was right after that, I think 3 consecutive sessions after that, this entity called Aiwass, this alien called Aiwass, channeled what was called the Book of the Law to Aleister Crowley. And Aiwass told him that he was the chosen one to usher in the age of Horus, or the Aeon of Horus. That the humans on this planet have gone through the Aeon of Isis, they've gone through the Aeon of Osiris, and now it's the time for the Aeon of Horus, who is the son, of course, of Isis and Osiris.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read Crowley's description of what the age of Horus will be, you look at the history that we've gone through over the last 100 years, and it's exactly what was prophesied to Crowley by this alien entity, Aiwass. It's exactly what's happening.
That's interesting.
All the violence you see, all the chaos, is exactly what was predicted by Aiwass to Crowley in 1904.
That's pretty interesting.
And when you read it, and when you read the description of how it was described, you say, "My God, it's exactly what's happening right now."
Mm-hmm. Well, does it give an ending?
Yeah, it says at the beginning that Horus is a child, and in the early part of the Aeon of Horus will be very chaotic. But as the child matures, that eventually there will be more of a drift towards more harmony. But they said the early part, there will be great wars and great chaos. And that's certainly what we're seeing.
Right. So is Horus an embodiment of a person or a place? What is the representation of Horus to them? You know what I mean?
Horus, well, Horus is part of the triune god of Egypt, which was Isis, Osiris, and Horus. Isis and Osiris gave birth to Horus, and Horus was supposed to, after Osiris had been killed by Set, and Horus was supposed to be the reincarnation of Osiris.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so on this timeline, in this representation, what does Horus really mean? It's not a real person or a deity. Is it a location on the globe?
No, it's
or
more
a consciousness.
It's more of a collective consciousness.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That's
okay.
Closer.
Right. Yeah, I was
It's
curious.
It's a collective attitude or a shift in social consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That the Aeon of Osiris was very patriarchal, very controlling, domineering. The Aeon of Isis was more matriarchal, and the Aeon of Horus, like anything goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly seems like it's a free for all.
And that's what one of the verses, one of the mantras that was given to Crowley was "Do what thou wilt will be the whole of the law."
Right. Yeah.
And that, but it went on to say that we are all men and women are stars.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely, it is. Right down to the atomic level, the cellular level. So we are. We have suits we wander around in, but we are star beings in a matrix, and we exist on a holographic world in a holographic universe. I mean, we can get really esoteric about it. You know it, and I know it. A lot of people don't pay attention because they're in this linear world, you know. But it's like breathing. It should be natural to understand the mechanics of the universe and the celestial mechanics.
Yeah.
And everything is magic. I mean, we know that. I mean, manifestation at will. So, you know, you attract what you manifest.
Right.
So these guys actually have perfected that to some degree, but still, you know, I don't see them as really good magicians because there's a lot of chaos here on this world. And how have they benefited? Honestly, have they benefited by the suffering of others, or what exactly have they achieved by causing this kind of, you know, havoc?
Well, my take on Aleister Crowley, I kind of went back and looked at his biography, and he was. And this kind of is kind of in common with him and Adam Weishaupt, all these so-called Illuminists. They seem to be militant intellectuals. They look at how, you know, the church has dominated and strangled, you know, intellect and science and so forth for so many centuries, and it's like these guys come out and it's like, they're going to kick the walls down.
Right.
And they're militant intellectuals, and they're not going to stand for the church or anybody telling them what to do and how to do it.
Well, see, and I can relate to that, but so does that make me?
I can relate to that, too, but then they were very egocentric. They were very narcissistic and very egocentric. So it's like, well, it's okay to be intellectual, but you're just so arrogant about it, and militant about it, that it seems like you're destroying, you know, the essence of what you're trying to create.
Right. Yeah, I think they'd have to be spiritually evolved. They have to transcend that to the highest level, and of course there would be a balance there. Yeah, between the analytical and the spiritual.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's easy for us to figure out.
But Crowley would say that's just a lot of sentimental hogwash. That's just nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I don't think tuning into the universe is nonsense at all. That's an intelligent energy and an infinite design. So I suspect, you know, he's gone now, so I'm sure he would have seen things differently after he transferred out, too.
Well, what's interesting is that Jack Parsons, after he became the Grand Master of the Ordo Templi Orientis in Pasadena, he was joined by, guess who?
Who?
L. Ron Hubbard.
Ah, Scientology.
Oh, my God. L. Ron Hubbard. So those two got together, and they were going to do ritual magic called Babylon Working, which was to create or to bring into this world the Antichrist.
Hmm.
And they were to do it. They got involved with a lady called Marjorie Cameron, and Jack Parsons claims that he impregnated Marjorie Cameron, and she allegedly gave birth to a child, a female child, interestingly enough.
Hmm.
Just, kind of like Rosemary's Baby.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whatever became of that child, I have not come up with any documentation about that.
Hmm. What year was that?
Well, it had to have been around 1946, 1947, around that time. Now, Aleister Crowley died in 1947. He was destitute, heroin addict. So he came to a bad end.
Mm-hmm.
In 1952, Jack Parsons blew himself up in his home laboratory.
Was that an accident, or what do you think?
Well, it was questionable.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI moved in and seized all his papers and all his files, and they are still classified to this day.
I smell a rat.
And then L. Ron Hubbard, of course, she founded Scientology, and he died of a stroke in 1986. So all three of them did not come to a particularly good end.
Right, yeah. You reap what you sow, basically.
So, I would have just dismissed the whole thing that these guys are just crackpots. Except when you go back and start to look at how NASA was engineering, like the Mars Pathfinder, the Mars Pathfinder program. Well, the second alien that Aleister Crowley claimed to have channeled was an entity called LAM. L-A-M, like in llama. LAM. Well, in Tibetan, LAM means Pathfinder.
Interesting.
And isn't it interesting that JPL would name their first Mars lander Pathfinder?
Yeah, that is no such thing as coincidence.
So I think, okay, there's these little tip-offs, that, well, wait a minute, that within NASA and within JPL, it's like they were taking the Parsons-Crowley information very, very seriously.
Right.
So I suspect there's a lot of stuff that they accessed from both Crowley and Parsons that has never met the light of day, but it very subtly influenced the programs, the exploration programs of NASA.
Right, that makes sense. Well, when we get back to the technological advancement merged with ritual, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And ritual alone wouldn't do that. However, a technological leap of some kind interfaced with the ritual, yeah, for sure. So that's just like some of the stuff they're able to do now in the underground with the black programs.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's no difference. Really, when you look at Tesla and all he was working on, of course, and that was some super advanced technology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you think about it. It's just love to have access to their libraries. Let's put it that way. Be kind of fun.
So anyway, this one thing leads to another, and then there's the Kennedy connection to all this. And Mike Barra and Richard Hoagland said when they were researching Crowley and Parsons and the NASA secrets, they never expected to find links to the Kennedy assassination. But whoa, lo and behold, okay, here's more connections. In that, okay, you have these three occult interests who are guiding, directing the the goals of NASA down a very specific path. And along comes John F. Kennedy, who is not a Freemason, who, in fact, 4 months after he got into office, he was making public claims against secret societies in the United States. He was drumming up support to end secret societies and end the secrecy. So, but consequently, he became rather good friends with Wernher von Braun. He liked Wernher von Braun, and John F. Kennedy had a genuine personal enthusiasm for the space, especially the Apollo program. He was really excited about that. But I don't think he fully understood the alchemical occult interests that were also directing the Apollo landing.
Mm-hmm.
So as his administration progressed, he got the crazy idea to, well, why don't we join forces with the Russians? It's stupid for the United States and the Russians both to be competing against each other in space exploration. And because the United Nations had already declared that space was not to be used by any one nation. So Kennedy was making overtures to Premier Khrushchev to see if we couldn't join our space program with the Russian space program. Well, the last thing NASA was going to stand for, especially occult NASA, would be sharing their deepest, darkest occult secrets with the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these people are not in the private club that we've created here.
Hmm.
So just 10 days before Kennedy's assassination, he sent a directive to James Webb, who was the mission director for NASA, to create a program of a joint Soviet-American space exploration program. A joint Russian-United States space initiative. That's what Kennedy was pressing for.
Mm-hmm.
And James Webb had agreed, well, okay, Mr. President, if that's what you want to do, then we'll start working on that program. Mm-hmm. Which would have exposed all kinds, God knows how many deep, dark secrets of NASA to the Russians. Well, nobody was going to stand for that. So consequently, John F. Kennedy was murdered in Dallas in an open-air Masonic temple on Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. Mm-hmm. And who became president? Freemason Lyndon Baines Johnson. And
yeah.
If you look at that picture of him on board Air Force One, and Congressman Albert Thomas is winking at Johnson right after Johnson takes the oath of office. Well, it just so happens that Congressman Albert Thomas held the purse strings for NASA.
Mm-hmm. Right. Once again, no coincidence.
Holy cow. It's like, all these little, dots. You start linking up all these little dots.
Right.
And you get just an incredible, incredible picture.
And there's no accountability, Jim. And once again, they changed the timelines. They changed the history of man since that whole event. And I don't think it's for the better. I really don't. And now the secret societies are the alphabet agencies. I mean, there's no such thing as eliminating secret societies. You're always going to have people who are hiding information.
Right.
So it's really amazing. And, it's interesting. Go ahead.
At the end of the day, it's just, everything is a private occult club that runs everything.
Well, what's weird? I mean, I am a cult. I mean, I'm into mysticism, and we don't act like that. So I just find it interesting. I understand that you keep certain things quiet. What's that?
Right. Why do we like the occult?
Well, because it's a link to higher consciousness. It opens the gateways to full light harmonics. I mean,
Well, that's part of it. But I looking back over my life and how I got involved in this UFO nonsense to begin with. And there is an aspect of magic to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's magic.
Life is magic. I love magic. I was into mysticism.
Wait a minute. It's like, the church and everybody has tried to take the magic out of everything.
Right. Yeah. Poison the spirit. Poison the soul.
There's no such thing as magic. The Catholic Church, no. If you practice magic, you're going to get burned at the stake. When in fact, the hierarchy of the church itself was totally obsessed and involved with magic.
Oh, I can tell you how close they are in ritual to a lot of pagan rituals. Let me tell you, the Catholic Church, it's like night and day. Yeah, but
right.
I mean, but very parallel. It's very strange. Yeah.
It is. And it's like, there's no such thing as magic. Well, I started to have a few experiences of my own over the years. I thought, wait a minute, this isn't normal. This is like, there is there is a magic under the surface here that seems to be guiding things.
Right. Oh, totally. I agree.
And I always, tried to stay in my rational, intellectual, scientific mindset that, that's just nonsense, or it's just my imagination. When in fact, wait a minute. Everything, the whole human race has been obsessed with magic, ever since we climbed out of the jungle and looked up and saw the moon up in the sky. So what the hell is that?
Well, it's alchemy of spirit, and when you think about it, you're talking about man's version of civilization versus the ancient celestials that were here before the record of man was created, and that's a whole different ball of wax. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're talking about our what we call star family, celestial heritage, and that's where the magic lies. There's no doubt about that. Yes, a sneaky Mark Snyder just texted me with a question for you, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. He said, "Has Jim heard the following? Parsons died in a home laboratory explosion at the age of 37, and the police ruled it as an accident, but many associates suspected suicide or murder." We kind of covered that a little bit, but.
Well, tell Mark that he needs to contact the FBI and see what their files say, whether it's an accident or not. And I think they'll probably say no comment.
Hear that, Mark?
No, the paper said it was an accident. He was working on some kind of propulsion project, and the whole thing blew up.
Right. But we kind of touched on that, and I think we.
Right. That's I think that's the public version.
Right.
But he may have been assassinated. Who knows? L. Ron Hubbard later confessed or claimed that he really was working for naval intelligence to infiltrate Parsons' ritual magic enterprises in Pasadena to see if he was a threat to national security.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Well, when anybody has or whenever anyone has a breakthrough in establishing connection to off-world intelligence, you bet they'll be there to disrupt that flow.
Right.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. When they were talking about the lunar landings, and I had this discussion the other day about some of the pictures of, obviously, we've been receiving footage from Mars and the moon, and a lot of it's airbrushed out. Obviously, there are things that have been airbrushed out. But my point was, I believe they're inserting images that are based on man's creation in order to distract the masses even further. Have you picked up on that at all?
I've done enough. Well, as far as just the pictures, the NASA pictures of the lunar landings and all that, I believe it's no accident that Stanley Kubrick released the film 2001: A Space Odyssey in 1968, just before we went to the moon. Mm-hmm. And it was a profound film because it set the tone. This is what you expect to see when the Apollo mission actually goes to the moon. So it's like there's so much that you see in the lunar landing photographs and so forth that are so reminiscent of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like if you're walking in reduced gravity, everybody walks in slow motion. Mm-hmm. Well, that's crap. If you have your earthbound musculature walking in less gravity, you're going to be walking faster because you have less resistance. Doesn't that sound more logical?
Exactly.
But no, everybody's moving in slow motion, and the little moon buggy is going in slow motion, and it's like they have taken those films and sped them up to normal speed, and you can see that. Well, wait a minute, this is a big con. And
yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead, Jim.
The real question is and this goes back to Werner von Braun and the Nazis that were also involved with NASA. And did they bring their flying disc technology along with them in their hip pockets? And that was actually the technology that put men on the moon and not the Apollo lander.
The disc?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I would have taken it a step further and said it would have been something more advanced than that. But very interesting, without a doubt. And what's funny, because I was very young, obviously, when they quote unquote went to the moon. But I look at the footage today and I really, really troubleshoot it. And I'm telling you, it just doesn't resonate with me, not at all. So I just don't look at it like it's valid. I try to understand. I try to say, well, yeah, I'm trying to, not even brainwash myself into believing it's real. And I tell you what, it looks so phony to me, and I can't seem to, to negate that.
Well, I was a teenager when that was all going on. I ate that stuff up with a spoon. I just loved NASA. I loved all the Apollo projects. I just thought it was great, and I believed. I went for it all, hook, line, and sinker.
Well, I can understand that, because NASA's been a role model. I mean, and I love NASA too when I was growing up. Don't get me wrong, but after I started assessing this footage, I was like, this doesn't look right. So, I mean, it's kind of a bummer, because it feels like we've been kind of had and gypped, and I've said that before. I don't appreciate being lied to, and I don't care if it's in for national security or whatever. I just don't think it's appropriate to do that to a mass collective. That's horrible.
Well, yeah, the tip-off for me was, you look at all the photographs of the lunar lander, and there are really great close-up photographs of the landing pads and everything, and those landing pads are pristine. I mean, you can imagine the thrust and the dust that would have been kicked up when that thing was coming down to land. And there's no evidence of a rocket blast underneath the lander. There's not a speck of dust on any of the landing pads. It looks like a pristine model that was just picked up and dropped on a Hollywood soundstage and photographed.
Ding, 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 you win. So who are they trying to impress? That's the bottom line, Jim. I mean, think about it.
And we suckered for that.
Oh, I didn't. I was just a little girl. But yeah, I mean, the American people wanted something to believe in, I'm sure. And I'm sure, back then it was cool, and that was when television first came out, wasn't it?
Well, that's those are the days when especially if Walter Cronkite told you on the news, then you believed it. Nobody questioned Walter Cronkite.
No, that's when they had fluoride in the water, right?
Said it. That was next to God.
Yeah, but that's when they had fluoride in the water, right, Jim? Right. And that was good for you too, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's very, very sad when you think about it. But I would like everything to be revealed. I would like everything that's been hidden to be revealed. And I do believe we are making more of a push for that each day. And I'm not talking about disclosure, because we're never going to see it come from them. But we have already disclosed it, so it doesn't matter. I mean, if we already know what's going on, we don't need them to confirm it anymore. I mean, I never did. So, I mean, maybe some people do, but I certainly don't.
Well, the other tip-off for me was that, after the Apollo, was it Apollo 17? 17. All the Apollo missions stopped. End of story. We never went back to the moon. I said, what was wrong with this? What happened? Werner von Braun, nobody ever talks about this either. Werner von Braun was kicked out of NASA. This guy was like God over there. He had over 1,000, German scientists working under him. And after the last Apollo mission, he was dismissed from NASA. They sent him to a nice office job in Washington, D.C. He had no authority. He had no power. He couldn't scrape up 2 cents in congressional funding for any other space project. And he just quietly, faded into oblivion.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
I said, well, what is this all about? Why aren't we flying back to the moon? Why didn't we have that 2001 space station, spinning in orbit out there with Pan Am and the Hilton Hotel? And why aren't we all just having excursions to the moon?
Well, I'm sure they do in the Black Space program. That's for darn sure.
That's another whole story.
Right. And Jim, we're going to head for a break. Everybody, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Jim Nichols. And Jim, you with me?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, that's quite interesting. You know, I need something to believe in, and unfortunately, it seems like everything has been a facade, huh?
I guess so.
Yeah, that's kind of a bust. Yeah, well.
Listen. I think about the progress of my own life, and I'm past 60, and it's like peeling, skin off an onion. There's another layer and another layer and another layer. And you think, well, I've got to the truth now. No, that's not the truth. There's another layer, and you keep peeling back the layers, trying to get to, well, where's the real here?
Exactly. I totally agree. Hey, I'm getting haunted by Mark Snyder with another question, and I normally don't take questions, but I will. I have one that I'm going to relay to you. It's another question from the remote chat room. So does Jim think this is correct? This comes from Dave McGowan's site, his article, Wagon the Moon Doggy. As it turns out, however, NASA doesn't actually have all that moonwalking footage anymore. Truth be told, they don't have any of it. According to the agency, all the tapes were lost back in the late 1970s, and all 700 cartons of them. As Reuters reported on August 15, 2006, the U.S. government has misplaced the original recording of the first moon landing, including astronaut Neil Armstrong's famous "One Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind." Armstrong's famous moonwalk, seen by millions of viewers on July 20th, 1969, is among transmissions that NASA has failed to turn up in a year of searching, spokesperson Gray Hataluma has said. And we haven't seen them for quite a while. So we've been looking for over a year, and they haven't turned up. So any information on that?
Absolutely not. That's the first time I heard that.
Okay.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and maybe you can follow up with Mark on that. But he said in all, some 700 boxes of transmissions from the Apollo lunar missions are missing.
Probably just as well.
Well, oops, where to go?
Easy come, easy go. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. They kind of do damage control, don't they?
Yep. They seem to.
Yeah, they certainly do. Well, my point being made, there has been a lot of people have been talking about all these anomalies on the moon, and they start showing all this type of piping and things like that. And I swear to me, it looks like somebody inserted images. I don't believe that they're extraterrestrial at all. I think somebody's been tampering with the footage and just playing around with people's heads. But that's my own impression.
Well, that's digital photography has gone so far beyond the pale since the silly TV pictures from 1969.
Mm-hmm.
You can do anything. You can do anything. You can create any kind of image you want digitally now, and it will look absolutely believable.
I agree.
I mean, I don't know if you've gone shopping for some of the digital animation of UFOs that you can find online,
mm-hmm.
and they're spectacular. They're absolutely spectacular, totally believable.
Mm.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is just digital animation.
Right.
So it's like, so in that sense, photography is no longer is not a fallback for authenticating anything anymore.
I agree, unless it's an old photograph, and of course, even then, they can be tampered with at some point, I suspect.
Sure.
Yeah, that's why I believe experience blows out everything else. I mean, people can say this and that about observation and pictures and footage, but I think the bottom line is real experience and real databases of archives of information are what's significant, finding that. And of course, all these people who have, I'm not bashing any contactees, I'm very familiar people have had experiences, but I would say a lot of those are mock and fabricated by the underground. So, it's been my impression.
You don't know what to believe anymore, I think.
Right.
So.
Well, the world's spinning pretty fast, and it seems like it's out of control, huh?
Well, I think what this has all done for me is I've gone back and reconsidered Jacques Vallée's assertion in his book Messengers of Deception.
Mm-hmm.
That essentially I'm kind of to the point where I think virtually all the UFO, the whole history of UFOs is a deception.
Mm-hmm.
And not just a military deception. I think that his assertion was UFOs have been with us, the whole history of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
But so have the stories of, fairies and goblins and all this other stuff. And his point was that there are hyperdimensional entities that can access our world and who can take on the shape of anything they want. And they usually do it within the context of the social order that they're dealing with. So if it's back during medieval times, people might see fairies and goblins.
Mm-hmm.
And now in a more high-tech civilization, we see flying saucers and little gray aliens.
Right.
But how many people have seen or even photographed, extraterrestrials that look 3D and perfectly solid that vanish right before their eyes or right before the camera?
Right. Once again, you get back to that magic is everywhere. And even back then in the old days, we didn't have all the interruptions we have now with satellites and everything else. So there was more of a direct line between what I would call the elementals and the fairy kingdoms.
Yes.
And sacred ceremony. So, yeah, I'm sure they could bring in all sorts of interesting beings or whatever it is, spirits of some kind or another. And now we've got all this other technological advances, excuse me, to a point where we have, the plasma is everywhere. We have plasma televisions and this and that. It attracts a lot of entities. And I'm sure we've opened up quite a few doorways insofar as, rips in the illusion of the space-time.
Right, right. Well, that's interesting because that's what Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley were trying to do. They were trying to create portals here, and one of the concerns that even Crowley expressed his concern that Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard had opened a portal in California that they couldn't close.
Which one was that? Where was it?
I don't know if it was in Pasadena or it was in the Mojave Desert. I've gotten some conflicting stories on where exactly
that's interesting.
These workings took place.
Right. Well, anytime you do a ritual, anytime you do anything, whether it's a prayer or a ritual affirmation, it doesn't matter. Right. You're opening up some kind of a doorway. Ascension portals, whatever you want to call them, they are opening. And that's one of the reasons I think that in the old days, people who were adept at that were persecuted because they were able to navigate and phase shift and teleport and do all these things because they could change their molecular structure in frequency. So, it gets pretty complex and it gets alchemical. However, I never discount that because I'm well aware that even though we live in a quote-unquote modern society, mankind's consciousness is not evolved, not to where it needs to be, not like it used to be. And I'm talking before mankind's template of his database,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we definitely need to clean up our act here. And it's like, it's so absurd. We can't function. We're so totally dysfunctional here as a society, and we want to go off to other planets.
Well, that's the sad part. I think they already have in the black program.
It's like clean up your act here, people.
Well, they're so programmed. Jim, the problem is society. I can't really blame them because they've been lied to since their birth. So they've been programmed with deception, programmed by deception, which is the name of my book, by the way, and literally lied to. So how are they going to know the truth when it's never been presented to them?
Exactly.
It's a shame. It's really a waste of a mind. It's a waste of a life.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
The scary thing is that it looks like the whole planet needs a complete reset.
I totally agree with you, without sounding cynical.
And,
Yeah. There's just such hatred and low order mentality. I've never seen anything like it in my life. But what I think is that as more light descends onto the world, people are showing their real colors. They're showing their behavioral patterns. They're having the drama bubbles. Everything's purging. And that's what I have noticed. So good or bad, that's what I'm observing.
Yeah, and it'll just have to play itself out.
Right. I'm just staying out of the way. I'll be the sacred witness, but man, there's nothing I can do to stop this. This is like an unstoppable force. Literally, I can't stop what's happening on this world right now, even through remote timeline shifts and everything else. What's happening right now, I feel, is just writing itself out.
Yeah.
It's basically centuries and centuries of false databases and programming and deception and everything else that goes along with it that's now just being a manifestation of what I call psychic regurgitation. It's
Well, it's interesting. I grew up a rather sheltered life back in Ohio, small town Protestant sensibilities, and we were taught that there's no such thing as magic, first of all.
I feel sorry for you.
And everything, we had gone through the Renaissance, we had gone through the Age of Enlightenment, and now we were the age of science and rationality, and all that, that medieval magic stuff was just a bunch of hocus pocus superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1968, I helped my sister move to California. And I'll never forget, we were at Santa Cruz and we were going through this quaint little bookstore, and I just happened to see a book about astrology. And I didn't know anything about astrology. But I looked at it, I thought, isn't that quaint? Isn't that quaint? Here we are in the 20th century, end of the 20th century, and there's still people that take this astrology stuff seriously. How absurd. Well, I'll tell you what, since that little incident in California, I've come to believe that that kind of magic never left. And it's like it's so pervasive, and it's just under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably more pervasive now than it ever was, even in the Middle Ages.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been around since the beginning of this world. I mean,
it went away.
Yeah, I know. And you know what's funny? I grew up in a mystery, and like not mystery, but a mystical home. I mean, I grew up around all that. So to me, that was the norm. And I wouldn't understand why people wouldn't know mysticism or the craft, because that's pretty much what I was exposed to. So, yeah, it's interesting.
I wasn't exposed to any of that when I was a kid. It was totally alien to me. And so, but I always was fascinated with UFOs.
Yeah.
I always had a fascination for that, thanks to Hollywood. I loved all the Hollywood movies about flying saucers.
Well, they usually parallel some form of truth, too. I mean, that was their way of spinning off some kind of valid data.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Now I've come full circle. I thought, we never left the Middle Ages.
Unfortunately. Well, hopefully we won't go into the Dark Ages. I mean, that's what I'm looking at right now, is the primordial behavioral pattern of mankind and the judgment against one's fellow man. It's unbelievable. I mean, just for beings like myself who are mystically inclined, I mean, we still get persecuted if we're in the wrong country. I mean, literally. It's inexcusable. The things that are going on are so not connected to source in any form or design or universal law or consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's all man's version of God's law, and it's gotten to the point where it's destroying each country, each person. It's really sad.
Yeah, well, I've kind of gone back and looked at the history of the occult. Well, what is the occult, and where did this all come from? And it came from very, very, very simple roots, where the indigenous peoples believed that everything was alive. Mm-hmm. There's a life force in everything.
Right.
And it's like, well, these people understood the quantum field. Yep,
it's consciousness in motion.
They didn't they understood quantum physics before anybody even, thought of the word.
Right. Absolutely.
That plants were alive people, and there's life force in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And certain individuals within the tribal group were probably more skilled than others in communicating with those spirits.
Right. Yeah, they were conduits for the energy. Yeah, and back then, like I said, you didn't have as much interference, and the people were eating a lot better, a lot more organic. I mean, we had organic before it was organic, right? I mean,
And like they would know to thank the universal field. They would know to thank the spirits for providing them with food. So consequently, their crops were more abundant.
Exactly.
Or they would thank the animals that they were going to kill for food. Mm-hmm. And the animals would come to them. Right. So these individuals within the tribes became very skilled with this, and they became revered as shamans. The shamans were highly revered within the tribe, and they understood that this is essential. This was an essential part of the health and the vitality of the tribe itself.
Mm-hmm. So, right. Yeah, the ancient witches were like that as well. I mean, you're talking druids, witches, pagans. Yeah, I mean, that's literally what they practice today. What we practice today is the same concept, respecting the law of the universe and respecting nature and the elements and of course, embracing consciousness in all forms and designs. And it's so easy for us to understand that everything is alive with a consciousness. I mean, animals have consciousness. Everything has some form of intelligent, some form of intelligent spiritual design. So
well, that we're all connected. We're all connected with that.
Right. If you choose to be.
With the animals, we're connected with the earth, and it's all one holistic energy we're all participating in. But modern humans see themselves as separate from all that. I'm separate, and it's like it's okay for me to go out and plunder the environment, and it's okay because the planet's just a dead rock anyway. So what difference does it make?
Yeah, there's a technological detachment.
Right.
And I think that's because of the technology. But literally, they're so into, what we call advancement that this civilization has lost touch.
What is advancement though? They're totally obsessed with the intellect, the left brain mentality that sees itself as separate from all this, when in fact it's a self-deception. And the right brain is always trying to tell you, dummy, you are connected to all this.
Right.
But we suppress that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is trauma too. I think society's been traumatized, even though they don't seem like they've been. I'm not talking like major physical abuse, but I think they've gone through enough abuse on a more subliminal level to a point where I believe that the mainstream is really traumatized and desensitized to spirit. They're not understanding the empathic connection anymore.
Well, they're just like MK Ultra mind control.
Right. Yeah. Mass hypnosis, without a doubt. Yeah. Well, they mastered that, whether people want to mock it or not. I mean, I know they did. I mean, obviously, where I've been, I can tell you all about it. But literally, I'm well aware that they've been able to control, manipulate the masses. They did a very good job of it. However, it's been non-productive, if you ask me. When you think about it.
Well, I certainly don't see that it's helped the planet at all.
Not at all. No. But I think this planet will do what she needs to. Go ahead.
This is the amazing thing about that militant intellectualism I was talking about earlier, and it's just gotten out of control. It's insane. It's becoming a total pathological insanity that's really driving the whole planet to destruction.
Yeah, it's like a mind virus.
It's very interesting. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Frankenstein.
The original? Yeah, I saw that a long time ago.
The Frankenstein with
black and white?
Robert De Niro.
What? You mean the original Frankenstein?
Well, this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Okay.
It's with Robert De Niro.
I saw that one.
And actually, they said it was Percy Shelley rather than Mary Shelley that actually wrote Frankenstein, which is very interesting because the character, Dr. Frankenstein, goes to Ingolstadt University, which just happens to be where Adam Weishaupt went to Ingolstadt University in Bavaria. And apparently Percy Shelley had joined the Illuminati at its very inception. And he was, of course, enamored of Adam Weishaupt and his grand plan for the universe here. But then he saw through it, and he became appalled by what Adam Weishaupt had in mind, that he was going to remake our whole world, our whole civilization, in his own likeness. And so he wrote Frankenstein. So Percy Shelley wrote this in like a moral allegory, where Dr. Frankenstein thinks he can create life, and Dr. Frankenstein thinks he can do a better job of it than God can. And Dr. Frankenstein is angry at God because his mother died when he was a child. So to create Frankenstein's monster is Dr. Frankenstein's war with God. But I can do a better job than God can. Well, at the end of the day, he couldn't. And instead, he created an aberration. He created a monster. He created an abomination. And that is precisely what the secret societies and the Illuminati and all the spawn of Adam Weishaupt have created here. we've created an abomination.
Right.
When this world was perfect to begin with, and nobody had brains enough to see it.
They didn't appreciate what they had. So true.
Right.
Even what comes to mind is the transhumanism, because the interface with artificial intelligence is not as cool as what people think it is. They're trying to deploy this brain chip, which they don't even need a chip. They can use signals to do it. But literally, I mean, if they think for 1 minute their lives are going to be groovy when they get interfaced, I have news for them. They're going to be completely controlled and manipulated. There's no free will involved when you get interfaced with that technology. I'll tell you point blank. I know.
If you listen. If you listen to the babblings of Ray Kurzweil and how he's going to use nanotechnology and to recreate the human race and to recreate the world better than it was, is that insane Dr. Frankenstein mentality.
Right.
I can do a better job than God can.
Yeah. Well, why don't they just go terraform a little planet by themselves? If they want to play God, why don't they just give them a little planet to play with that doesn't have any life on it, and let them go have fun, and stop using people as guinea pigs? I mean, that's my point. Why bring everybody along for the ride? It's just not okay. It's not. You're violating everybody's free will in that, and I don't think that's appropriate.
Well, I think at the end of the day, I'm one of those that still believes that the planet Earth is a consciousness itself. Mm-hmm. And I always been of the belief that Mother Earth will get the last word.
Oh, I know so. Yeah. I don't know if I'll be on the planet when that happens, but yeah.
Right. And it's like the old TV commercial. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Well, yeah. I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see the wrath of Mother Nature here unleashed one of these days, and it's like enough is enough is enough. Well,
I think you're already seeing it, with a lot of things that are happening across the globe right now, and even with the magnetic field, the magnetosphere and everything else that's going. There are things that are happening right now that people aren't paying attention to that could cause some serious problems later on.
Well, it's like the chemtrail thing, and it's like I wonder at what point have they gone too far.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, have we already gone, past the point of no return here?
Yeah, exactly. If it's not broken, why are they trying to fix it is my point, too. And, it's one thing to use free energy for a better world, but it's another thing to do what they're doing. We didn't need to have all this stuff happen. I mean, we could have just, let those patents ride out and open them up and open up the free energy and let everything go to the highest level of our evolution without control manipulation. I mean, it's such a simple equation, Jim. I don't know why they don't see it. And maybe it's about losing power and control on their end, which, of course, they would. But
that's their obsession, and that's their whole focus of their existence is power and control, and maybe that's the lesson that needs to be learned at the end of the day. I mean, that's what Dr. Frankenstein learned. He said, he realized at the end of his life that, his war with God was a complete mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells us, don't follow my path because I've shown you, the way not to do it.
Right. Well, in the end, they surrender to the streams of creation, whether they like it or not. And I think that's the moral to that story. But unfortunately, they don't see it until they're gone. I mean, usually people don't get what they're doing wrong until after they transfer out. And at that point, there's a bardo, and they go through a cycle of, review. I mean, those of us who are expanded in consciousness do. I don't know where these guys are heading. They may not even get to do that. They just might get us eliminated immediately. So, it tells me that they really don't have much of a soul force at all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be the person that screwed up mankind. I'll tell you that much right now. I'm glad I can kind of like walk away quietly, opposed to them, because I don't have to take any responsibility for what they've done, none whatsoever, and that makes me feel very good, because they screwed up big time. I don't think they could have screwed up any worse than they have. So I guess if they were looking to pass a test, they failed.
Well, in one sense, I think we're living on a planet with very, very young, immature souls.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this is kindergarten. I don't know if it's even that would. I think it's daycare.
Well,
it's daycare for this just little brats on the playground that don't know how to play in a civilized manner.
Well, you take their toys away when they act up, Jim. That's the thing. They're going to have to get all their goodies and their toys and their bank accounts have to be taken from them then at that point, huh?
So, at some point, Mother Nature steps in and has to whack them on the butt a little bit, get their attention.
Yeah, I totally agree with that for sure. Well, Yeah, I don't know what to say anymore. I watch the world just kind of fading away these days, but I do try to hold a vision for a more positive future, but it just doesn't seem like it's formulating much these days. So, yeah. So what do you see down the road? I mean, what have you been paying attention to besides the research that you're doing? Have you honed in on anything that you find significant?
Well, I've just kind of thrown up my hands. It's like, okay, well, whatever happens, happens.
Right, because it's too bizarro. Yeah.
This is too bizarre, and it's I don't see any. Certainly not from the top. I don't see any indications of enlightenment going on. I do see there seems to be more of a groundswell, within the population itself with the alternative information, alternative news kind of in that kind of field. It seems like more people are waking up.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it makes me wonder if people are being poisoned in some way, because when I look at the madness, like even in the Middle East, that's a perfect example of insanity in motion. So I'm thinking to myself, are there something over there that's poisoning their minds, like poisoning them and making them psychotic, or are they just defective? I'm not kidding. I mean, you have to ask, is the water bad over there, or is there something going on that's creating this insanity?
Well, you have to go back, and it's no accident that that this original magic appeared in that part of the world. It appeared in Babylon and Samaria, and it's like this seems to be the birthplace of madness.
Right. Well, it's I would say jinn possession, but there's definitely something going on there where there is no connection to spirit. I don't care what they call themselves. I don't care how religious they say they are. These people are completely disconnected from spirit. Completely. If they had any connection whatsoever, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. So that's a no-brainer. But there's something going on there, and also you have to look at frequency. Now, frequency changes people's personality without a doubt. So maybe there's something getting scrambled that's causing more havoc. Now, it could be an esoteric thing. It could be an occult, some kind of a frequency or a gateway activating over there.
Well, Richard Hoagland would always point out that look at the 19.5, look at the 33rd parallel, and that's where if you look at a tetrahedron, you take a tetrahedron, put a circle around it. The top of the flat top of the tetrahedron will slice that circle right at the 33rd parallel. So whatever the magic is, it seems to amplify it at that meridian. And I'm sure there's energy portals, and there's probably hyperdimensional portals there and God knows what kind of insanity, their crazy magic ceremonies have opened up over there.
Well, it's interesting because I don't believe they can hold the vibration of pure light. So if there's something there that's very powerful and higher, hyperdimensional and very high in frequency, then that would explain if people were getting hit with that energetically, they wouldn't be able to handle it if they weren't evolved enough spiritually, which means they would be acting violent, which is what they're doing. So that makes sense right there.
Well, I live here. I'm probably the 32nd parallel. Phoenix is the 33rd.
Yeah.
And I used to like to go up to Sedona. I don't know if you've ever been to Sedona.
I'm supposed to go there because according to my astrological chart, it's one of the best places for me. So. Okay.
It'd be interesting to see how you respond to it. But I've always wanted to live in Sedona, but for some reason I've never wound up there. But I've known people that have moved to Sedona from other parts of the country, and they always tell you that, well, the energies in Sedona are so much more intense that if you live in Poughkeepsie and you're a little bit crazy, if you move to Sedona, you'll be a lot crazy. So it's like where you live, the energies of wherever it is you live will have a profound effect on your psyche.
Right, yeah.
So I'm thinking, and my God, it's like, what is it about the Middle East? What is it about Israel? What is that, the energy that's there that, you know,
right,
societies have been obsessed with.
Power.
Ever since the beginning of the human race. What is it in that area that makes people crazy?
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah, well, they have to be calibrated for the vibrational frequency and signature. I mean, you know, Sedona, for example. I mean, if people are aligned and their chakra systems and their exotonal lines are all, you know, aligned accordingly, then they'll be able to download higher frequencies, which of course is a light language, without getting too esoteric on everybody. But literally, I mean, it's not a big deal once you learn how to calibrate and allow more higher consciousness energies to descend into the body and alter the DNA through light consciousness. But that's another story, and that's another episode altogether. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of limitation over there. I mean, from what I've observed is that there's a lot of programming based on false belief systems, based on these man-made gods that have been wreaking havoc. I mean, for century after century, it never gets any better because they haven't changed or evolved or grown spiritually. And until they stop taking each other out and murdering each other and cutting people's heads off, they're never going to ascend. They're never going to get it. That's not going to solve anything. They could kill everybody on the planet. They'll still be unevolved and they'll still get wiped out. So
have you seen any footage of the military when they went into the museum in Iraq?
I don't think
during
so.
the Gulf War?
No.
Well, this is really interesting. I just came across this video by, I think he's an Australian filmmaker. He's called Chris Everard. And he did a piece on the Illuminati. But anyway, in this video, shows the American military just bashing their way through the walls there at the museum in Baghdad and stealing artifacts. Well, in this one chamber, there are what they call genie bottles. And they're these large ceramic or terracotta jars that they're kind of pointed on the top, and they're called genie bottles. And they said, and these were some of the things, the artifacts that were being removed from the museum by the United States Army.
Interesting.
Well,
Can I have one?
They said, don't break the genie bottles. Don't open them up.
Oh, come on.
Because they contain evil spirits.
Okay. According to who, though? Where does that data come from?
Well, according to, it's explained in the video.
Okay. I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
It's
well, for me.
They said that this goes back to the alchemy of King Solomon, that these genie bottles were actually had been taken from the temple in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. That King Solomon was lord of all the jinn, all the genies. That he was the master over these demonic entities. And another thing that they did, you know about fetishes and so forth. That contain energy and so forth. Well, they said they took shards of the broken pottery and stuff from the museum in Baghdad, brought it to the United States, and just scattered it, you know, over the countryside. I said, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? Stupid. But I think, well, wait. What if there's evil entities or negative entities that are attached to these pottery fragments, and that they're spreading those out across the United States?
That's interesting. Well, what if they weren't necessarily evil to begin with? Maybe they were trapped and got ticked off, and maybe they were perceived as evil. Maybe they're not evil at all. Some of those genies.
Well,
see, I would have opened one of the bottles, obviously.
According to the Kabbalah, there's echelons of demonic entities, just like there's echelons of angelic entities. And what King Solomon was the master of, he learned how to, you know, using the Kabbalah, he learned how to become the master of these evil entities.
Right, yeah, command them, yeah.
Okay? And, you know, that was
Well, that's what Crowley was doing too, wasn't he?
That was one of King Solomon's claim to fame, that he
Right.
was, that these, in fact, the legend is that these evil entities actually helped him build the temple, the great temple in Jerusalem.
And what happened to these entities?
Well, I'm watching this and I said, geez, this sounds like Ghostbusters. This sounds like, we keep the evil spirits in a containment.
Frequency fence?
Okay.
Okay.
And it's and this is the other thing about Ghostbusters. If you recall the movie, they were doing, well, it was this apartment on Central Park West. The Central Park West apartment was a portal to another dimension, thanks to the evil ritual workings of some mad occultist. You remember that in the movie Ghostbusters?
Vaguely. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Sigourney Weaver lived in this apartment on Central Park West, and she had somehow, there was a portal in her apartment that, was access to this other hyperdimension. All the evil spirits. Well, it just so happens that in 1918, Aleister Crowley had an apartment in Central Park West where he was doing these kind of rituals. So it's like it becomes comic after a point. It says, oh my God. So that's where Ghostbusters got the idea, for their haunted apartment in New York City.
Well, didn't Dan Aykroyd write that?
Yeah.
Okay.
He co-authored that.
Well, he was into the paranormal too, right?
Huh?
He's into the paranormal and UFOs.
Oh, yeah, he's totally into the occult. And I think so is Harold Ramis, who just died recently. And he was, I think they wrote it together.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right.
So it's like, well, they weren't just picking this out of the ethers. They had done some research, apparently, about Aleister Crowley and his ritual workings in New York City.
That's really interesting.
And Aleister Crowley also did magical workings from a home he owned on the banks of Loch Ness.
Oh, that's interesting.
So is the Loch Ness Monster one of his creations?
Well...
it just gets, the more you dig into this, the crazier it gets.
The funny thing is I think people give him a lot more power than he had on a psychic level, on an esoteric level. I think he had an influence, no doubt, and I think he did some things that were very controversial because of back then and that timeline he was on. But you talk to people like who are into the craft these days and rituals, they're not that impressed with him, So I don't know. I don't know what to say about him. It's possible he did some strange things and opened up some very, very bizarro gateways, but I've never seen a dimensional portal that can't be sealed, on an esoteric level. So if there's a rip in the fabric, look at the atomics blasting. You're talking about things like that can actually make a huge wave and rift into our dimensional space.
That was allegedly also an alchemical working that was engineered with the occult interest of Robert Oppenheimer. That was an occult ritual magic working to master control of materia prima itself.
Well, you're tearing a fabric. Yes. Literally. And so you're going to open up something. There's going to be a parallel bleed-through effect. There's no doubt about it. That's just science 101.
Well, apparently he knew that. Apparently there was more to the Trinity test than people talk about, but that it was a deliberate alchemical occult experiment.
Right. So what do you think they were trying to bring in? Okay, so say they're trying to do this, open up these gateways, create a rift or a rip in the fabric. Well, what do you think they were trying to establish? Who do you think they're trying to contact? Positive beings or some that aren't so positive?
No, it's all about control and power.
So they're basically wanting to harness more and more.
Well, frankly, if you listen to, there's recordings of Oppenheimer's comments after the test, where he tells the story of Krishna.
Right, I heard that one. Yeah.
Who was explaining to the Prince Arjuna that this is your responsibility, that that sometimes you have to follow through on your responsibilities, even though they may seem repugnant to you. And he said, and then that's when Krishna said, no. Then he revealed himself to Arjuna, and he says, he showed the multi-armed God Krishna, who said, now I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Mm-hmm.
So, was Krishna the evil entity that Oppenheimer was trying to bring through the portal?
Well, or was it just that they were so brainwashed by their programming that, people misperceive information a lot, and they start getting into mysticism and mythology, and they don't understand what they're dealing with, and of course, who knows? I mean, they could have been assessing it wrong to begin with, but, well, whatever they did, it didn't help much, did it?
You don't know, how, the atomic bomb was developed by a cabal of Jewish physicists, and you don't know how deeply they were involved in the Jewish Kabbalah in trying to manipulate the quantum field with their bomb project. And it's like they're toying with the primal forces of creation here.
Mm-hmm.
And as the more I think back on it, it's like this had to be an occult alchemical operation more than just a scientific operation to build a bomb.
Right.
That there was something more going on. And the other thing that nobody can really answer to this day satisfactorily is that they built this huge bottle. It looks like the liner of a thermos bottle. But this thing weighed, I don't know how many tons, that they buried in the ground at the test site, at the Trinity test site, that there was something that it was a structure of steel. No, it was concrete and lead. So there was something in this bottle that they wanted to irradiate when they set off the bomb.
Or was it to absorb the radiation?
I think it was something that they wanted to irradiate. There was something that they wanted. There was something contained in this monstrous bottle that they wanted to irradiate. They wanted to test, or they wanted to expose it to the radiation of the atomic bomb. And I don't think there's been a clear explanation of what that bottle was. I think it was called Jumbo. And there's photographs of it, being lowered into the ground there at the test site in New Mexico in 1945.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never heard any satisfactory explanation of what that was for in relation to the bomb. Like the bomb itself was up on top of a high gantry, way above the ground. So what in the devil was this thing? This big giant concrete bottle that they're burying in the ground at the test site.
So did they dig it up?
Which is also at the 33rd parallel. I assume they dug it up. I assume they removed it, but I don't think, whatever it was, I suspect it's classified.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting. I'll have to do some research on that. I haven't heard that part.
That is bizarre. It's very bizarre.
Well, you think about how much they've done detonation-wise, it's been quite a bit, actually, when you think about it, in the United States even.
Right.
So that doesn't include underwater explosions and everything else and other sorts of demolition. So it's quite a bit, without a doubt. And Jim, we're getting ready to wrap this up soon enough, but I do want to make sure everybody, if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, right now, there's no good way. My computer's not functional enough. But they're welcome to visit my website. It's jimnicholsufo.net. That's JIMNICHOLS.net. And like you said, I have a number of interesting blogs.
Mm-hmm.
None
videos.
Of which cover this topic as yet. I need to do a blog on this topic.
Oh, definitely. What about your videos too? Where can they access this?
Actually, I have like 7 videos now. Actually,
Excellent.
On UFOTV YouTube, and they cover all sorts of topics about Nazi saucers and the Pleiadians and secret Mars base and so forth. So,
excellent. Yeah.
I even got one on Nibiru. They'll enjoy that one. So,
right.
I have a lot of topics.
Well, Nibiru seems to be fading out. Planet X, I guess people will dispute that, but it's been awfully quiet. For a while there, people were really talking about the Planet X, and of course now.
Well, it kind of comes and goes. People get excited about it, and nothing happens, and then some kind of anomaly will pop up, and then people get all excited again.
Right, the sky is falling, right?
But the one thing that is consistent, and which that my Nibiru video really addresses, is all the information that's coming out of the Vatican, which is to prepare people for the coming of the extraterrestrials who may present a whole new gospel.
Oh, no, that's mind control.
So you can explore that. Explore that and see what the Vatican has to say about that. And
don't get me started.
Scratch your head and wonder, well, why is the Vatican talking about this stuff now?
Because they won't have any control, obviously, and they'll want to delegate it. And
that would certainly explain it, wouldn't it?
Well, you know what's really funny? I mean, it all smells like Project Bluebeam to me anyways, you look at it. I mean, if they're trying to give everybody a heads up about an extraterrestrial contact, then it sounds like some type of Project Bluebeam being deployed. But, we are the star people. I've said this before. We don't need to have an extraterrestrial contact with our... We are the extraterrestrials we seek. In other words, we are those beings. Once we ascend to higher levels of consciousness, we would realize that. So I think the biggest thing is that our evolution has been shut down and switched off deliberately by these people that we've been talking about, certain parties that be. And for the most part, people don't understand how to switch it back on. And
well, it could be Project Bluebeam or the alchemical occultists deep within the Vatican are going to open a portal so some kind of strange entities, hyperdimensional entities, can access our world.
Well, the thing is...
People call them angels or whatever,
yeah.
Extraterrestrials. We have been conditioned to see extraterrestrials or understand extraterrestrials when, in fact, they're hyperdimensionals. Absolutely.
I agree with you on that one. It's interesting, too. They don't need a middleman, by the way. They don't need the church. I think that the church needs to get a life and stay out of everybody else's... What's that?
The church needs them to maintain the control.
Exactly. It's all about mass control, you bet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what's so funny about it. But you know what? We don't need them. Just like beings who are evolved spiritually don't need them. You don't need a middleman between you and the universe. It's you have a direct line. You don't need anybody in between there trying to tell you otherwise. So, I mean, I think that the thing is they've lost control and they're trying to find a way to get control back, and it's just not working.
Well, it's at the end of the day, it's all called alchemical social engineering.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's about all we've seen on this planet for many, many centuries.
Right, and it really doesn't do anybody a benefit. Actually, it's a disservice to mankind, unfortunately. Nobody knows what's best for you but you. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. And if people say that they think they do, then that's not okay, and that's not correct at all. So, but that Vatican is one sneaky little area.
Yep.
They hide a lot of data that doesn't belong to them.
Well, it's there. At the top of the pyramid, in all the structures, whether it's NASA, whether it's the federal government, whether it's the Vatican, whether it's the British monarchy, at the top of the level, it's all smoke and mirrors and magic and the occult, and it's a game, it's a competition within those groups as to who's going to be top dog.
Right, yeah, it's king of the hill. It's really interesting. Go ahead.
There's no honor amongst thieves.
None at all, yeah. But, I've always known.
Whoever ends up top dog, wins.
What do they get? Nothing, really. What? They're not going to inherit this planet. This planet doesn't want them. They don't have control over the people, and the more power they try to achieve and try to get, the less power they have. So they have the illusion of power. They have the illusion of a lot of things. Money is a form of energy. So if they have a lot of money, well, that's just, doesn't really mean a lot. They don't use money in the universe, You have to have consciousness for that.
But even money is an old Babylonian alchemical magic trick.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
the Federal Reserve is nothing new. It's like the whole scam was invented by the Babylonians a long, long time ago.
Right. Yeah. It'd be nice if they could just get back to bartering or something else, or even instant manifestation to a point where everybody just manifests at consciousness will, and we don't need what we have anymore. We can just kind of erase everything and reset it to a more what I'd say more Atlantean style civilization, an advanced consciousness, not a downfall, of course, but something a little more light.
Yeah, we're due.
We're definitely due for it. Well, there's beings like us who are here, who are on and up to speed and understand what's going on, and I know people who are listening are in tune and understand as well. So, but I do want to thank you for being on tonight too, Jim. It's been really great. I love having you on. I always like to have you on ever so often and just kind of chat and connect in a bit, because you have so much information. You're always working on so many different programs and projects that I find it very interesting. And there's a lot I learned tonight, actually. I didn't realize some of the things you were talking about tonight, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff out there, that's for sure. And I'm just amazed how I fall into these certain lines of research, and it's like that just astounds me.
Well, there's so much information.
I don't think I set out to do this, but I just kind of fall into this research, and I'm just amazed by it. And then one thing leads to another, and and then I have you to share it with.
Well, I'm glad. Well, it's kind of like a puzzle, too. We put the pieces of the puzzle together, and sometimes we can compare notes, because I do that with you, too. It's like a sounding board. I get to bounce information with you. And that's always really good to do. There's a lot there, but, you have to sift through it, because then there's all that misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it. Sure. Everything is been tainted and watered down. And then, of course, even in alternative media, you have to use discernment. I mean, there's so many things you have to look at with such a analytical mind, because you can't go by everything you read.
True.
And but at least we have the internet, and I'll say that much, because if we didn't have the internet and we didn't have resources, just like what we do, it would be a real bummer, because you can't hear it elsewhere. I mean, you just can't find this kind of information. I used to go to bookstores all the time when I was a youth, and obviously I was reading books all the time, and that's where I acquired a lot of my information growing up, especially on mysticism and the occult. But you know what? Those books aren't even around anymore.
No.
I mean, I feel bad. I gave a lot of my books away like years ago, and I mean, they're like out of print now. So.
Well, I can see a lot of the UFO books that I have are virtually useless. Because they all they do is talk about the gee whiz. Gee whiz, aren't UFOs special? And they go into a lot of nitty-gritty, nitpicky information about particular cases, but they seem to miss the overall picture. Well, what is this all about? What is this doing to our culture? What is this doing to our psyche?
Right.
And so I'm to the point where I need to go back and get a copy of Messengers of Deception by Jacques Vallée, which is a classic, and it's like, that's the book I really need to be reading.
Is that in print still?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But Vallée, right at the get-go, seemed to have a handle on this whole thing. But nobody wanted to hear what he had to say. No, we were all dazzled by the idea of extraterrestrials coming here.
Right. Yeah, it's a light show.
We didn't want to hear Jacques Vallée saying, well, it's like these could be hyperdimensional beings who are just deceiving you.
Well, I don't believe they're negative. I believe it's based on the evolution of people's consciousness as to what degree they're going to understand what they're dealing with on a celestial level. That's just my own impression. I don't believe mankind has reached the state of consciousness he needs to be at in order to experience these things, these beings on the pure level of light consciousness. That's my own take anyway. But we are down to 1 minute here. Jim, I do want to thank you very, very much for being on the show again. It's been awesome to have you on. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I'm not sure who's coming up next. Keith, if you want to text me real quick, I'll let everybody know. But yeah, and are you still painting, Jim?
Oh, no, I'm researching.
Cool. Well, researching is good. And also, stay tuned for Behind the Paranormal on Dark Matter Radio Network. Sounds good. And, well, start painting again, would you?
If I can just tear myself away from all this research, it just won't let me go.
Well, I understand that one for sure. You going to give us a teaser insofar as what you're working on right now?
I'm totally absorbed in getting my computer up and functional again. That's overwhelming at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, get that computer up and running. And everybody, thank you again for tuning in. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Thank you, Keith.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jim. Bye.